This is Marie Segaris from Underground Crafter, and in today's tutorial I'm going to show you all the stitches you need to know to make the modern Melissa skirt. For the pattern, you can find a link above and in the notes on YouTube. And basically for this particular pattern, the Melissa stitch, you're going to chain an odd number of chains. For this particular sample, I have 15. But if you look at the pattern, you'll see how many you need for a particular row. You'll also be using a Tunisian crochet hook and a yarn that is appropriate for that hook. Remember that for Tunisian crochet hooks, you'll want to use a hook about 2 sizes larger than what you would use in a regular crochet hook. So you have your odd number of chains. And what you're going to do first is you're going to do the standard return. So you're going to skip 1 stitch, and I use the back bump of the chain. So if you look on your chain, on the front it looks like loops. On the back you can see these little bumps. I like to work into those when doing Tunisian crochet. So I'm going to skip 1 bump, and then I'm going to insert my hook underneath the next bump, yarn over, and draw through a loop. I'm going to keep that loop on the hook, and I'm going to continue to do that all the way across. I don't have to skip any chains except the first one, so I'll go right into the next bump, insert my hook under it, yarn over, and draw up a loop. And do this all the way across. It's important to note that you don't have to work into the back bump. If you prefer to chain into the standard part of the, to work into the standard part of the crochet chain, you can do that with this stitch. But you'll get a cleaner edge if you work into the back bump, which I like because for this particular skirt, it doesn't have an edging. So having that clean edge really helps a lot. So again, you're just going to keep inserting your hook into these bumps or into each chain across, yarning over and drawing up a loop, which you're going to leave on the hook. And you're going to keep doing that all the way across until all of your chains are on the hook. Now, if you're following the skirt pattern, you're going to have quite a few more chains than this, but this tutorial is just to walk you through each stitch. So once you get to the very last one, and that one's usually the toughest one because it's like kind of, you know, tight over there, but don't worry, just insert your hook in and get it on there, yarn over and draw through a loop. You'll have your set of stitches. And now we're going to do something called the standard return. That was picking up our loops for the first row, or the setup row is what it's called in the pattern, and that's the forward. So something to think about with Tunisian crochet is that each row really has 2 rows. There's a forward where you add the loops and a return where you take them off. So for the standard return, and this will be used in most rows of this pattern, we're going to chain 1. And then we're going to yarn over and pull the hook through 2 loops at once. And we're going to continue that across. Yarn over, pull the hook through 2 loops. Yarn over, pull the hook through 2 loops. And you'll keep doing that all the way across your row until you have just 1 loop left on the hook. And that'll be when you get ready to start your next row. All right, so now we're going to start the first row of this stitch pattern. And something to keep in mind with Tunisian crochet is that unless otherwise instructed, this first stitch here underneath the loop on the hook, the first loop on the hook, you're not going to work into. So we're going to skip this stitch right here, which we're calling the first vertical bar. And now we're going to start the forward of the first row with the Tunisian knit stitch. If you've never worked the Tunisian knit stitch before, you're going to go to the next vertical bar. And if you look at it, you can see that there's a loop there. You're going to insert your hook from the front to the back of that loop, yarn over, and draw up a loop. So we're going to do that again. You're going to look for that next vertical bar. You're going to open it and see that there's really a loop inside of there. You're going to insert your hook into the loop, yarn over, and draw up a loop. So that's the Tunisian knit stitch. Now for this particular pattern, we're not going to actually work the traditional Tunisian knit stitch, but I want to show you what it was. What we're going to do for the very first stitch is we're going to insert our hook as for the Tunisian knit stitch. So again, we're going to find that next vertical bar, We're going to insert our hook through it from the front to the back. We're going to yarn over and we're going to pull up a loop, but we're also now going to make 3 chains. 1, 2, 3. And what you'll find is that because this stitch is so tall, your first loop is going to stretch, and that's okay. We want to keep all these stitches sort of the same height. So what you're going to find is that when you're not chaining, your stitches are going to draw up a little, and you want to let that happen. So now for the next stitch, we're going to do just a regular Tunisian crochet, a Tunisian knit stitch. So we're going to go to that next vertical bar, insert our hook through from front to back, yarn over and draw up a loop, nice and tall. And now the next stitch is going to be that what we're calling the Melissa stitch. So you're going to insert your hook as if to knit, yarn over and draw up a loop, and then 3 chains. 1, 2, 3. And we're going to repeat that all the way across. So we're going to do our standard knit stitch, which is going into the next vertical bar, inserting the hook through, yarn over and draw up a loop, bring it up nice and tall. And then in the next one, we're going to do our Melissa stitch. So we're going to insert the needle like for the knit stitch, yarn over and draw up a loop, and then chain 1, 2, 3. And we're going to continue that all the way across. So knit stitch, nice and tall, and then knit stitch, regular height, chain 1, chain 2, chain 3. And we're going to continue that all the way across. So again, knit stitch is going to be in the next vertical bar. We're going to slide the needle between those 2, yarn over and draw up a loop nice and tall, and then insert the needle for the knit stitch, and then chain 1, chain 2, chain 3. Okay, keep doing that all the way across. Okay, we're going to repeat that pattern until we have our last 2 bars. Then we're going to do that Melissa stitch again. So we're going to knit, Tunisian knit stitch, chain 1, 2, 3. Oops. 1, 2, 3. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do the Tunisian simple stitch in the last one. Now the Tunisian simple stitch is usually done like this, where you insert your needle from side to side underneath the next vertical bar and then draw a loop through. But I'm going to pull that out. I'd like to make a nice solid edge. So for this particular pattern on the last stitch, if you turn it, you see it has more of a traditional crochet loop. What I want to do is I'm going to insert my hook under both of those loops like this, and then I'm going to yarn over and pull through for my Tunisian crochet stitch. What that's going to do is on the side it's going to look like a chain, which really matches this side, which is looking like a chain, and so that'll make it much easier to join the pieces together. So now we're going to repeat that standard return where we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to yarn over and pull through 2 loops all the way across. Yarn over and pull through 2 loops all the way across until you have just the 1 chain left. Okay, so now we've done our first row, and as we know from most patterns, the first row is a little bit different than the next rows. So let's go to the next row, which is pretty similar, but here's going to be the difference. We're always still going to skip this first loop underneath the loop that's on the hook. So we're skipping that first vertical bar, and then we're gonna go to this top chain of these 3. We're gonna do our Tunisian knit stitch. So again, we're going to insert the hook between this loop from front to back, yarn over and pull up a loop, and then we're gonna chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and then in the regular Tunisian knit stitches, we're going to do Tunisian knit stitches. So we're just inserting our hook through the loop, yarn over and draw up a loop. We'll be doing that all the way across. So wherever we see these chain 3s, we're going to insert our hook to the top chain of that group as to knit, yarn over and draw up a loop, and then we're going to chain 1, 2, 3. And then for every Tunisian knit stitch, we'll do another Tunisian knit stitch in there. and that will be repeated all the way across. And once again, we're going to end with our last 2 stitches. So our last 2 stitches are going to be that Melissa stitch where we insert our hook into that 3rd chain and make a Tunisian knit stitch, and then chain 1, 2, 3. And our final stitch will be that Tunisian simple stitch, which we're doing underneath both of these loops here. So we're going to just do that and pull the yarn through. And then we're going to continue the standard return and that forward until we're ready to decrease. So if you're following along with the pattern, you may be up to the point where we do the decrease return. So I'm now going to walk you through the decrease return. So for this decrease return, we're going to start with a yarn over and draw through 2 loops instead of starting with that chain. And we're going to repeat that all the way across. Yarn over and draw through 2 loops, yarn over and draw through 2 loops, yarn over and draw through 2 loops, all the way across to the last 3 stitches. And that's where we'll do something a little bit different. But up until that point, it'll just be yarn over and draw through 2 loops across. Okay, so now I'm down to my last 3, and I'm going to yarn over and draw through 3 loops. What I did in that decrease row is I decreased a stitch at the first and last part of the row on the return. So you should have 2 less stitches than what you started out with at this point. If you're following along with the Melissa stitch pattern, we're going to do a similar row to what we've done, except that we're going to skip the first chain 3, because as you can see how these 2 are joined together. This is the stitch underneath, and the chain 3 is really close to it. That's because we decreased. So we're going to skip that, and we're going to actually alternate our pattern now, so that where our first stitch is a Tunisian knit stitch, and then our next stitch is that Melissa stitch, where we're going to insert our hook into the top of the chain 3, do the Tunisian knit stitch, and then chain 1, 2, 3. So if you were following along for the increases and decreases, you'll see that the stitch pattern has shifted slightly. So we're going to keep doing that across, where we're going to go Tunisian knit stitch, then in the top of the chain 3, we're going to do Tunisian knit stitch, chain 1, 2, 3, and we'll be repeating those all the way across. We're doing that across the last 3 bars. When we get to the last 3 bars, we're going to Tunisian knit stitch, skip this stitch, and then do our Tunisian simple stitch through that last double loop. Now that again is only if we're decreasing. If we're not decreasing, we're just repeating that original row over and over. But for the skirt pattern, we do have some decreasing, so that's what we'll be doing. And then we'll use our standard return, where we start with the chain 1, and then we yarn over and draw through 2 loops all the way across. If you're following along with the modern Melissa stitch pattern, the next time the pattern gets interesting is on row 8, and that is a different way of decreasing. So let's go through that. For that pattern decrease, you're going to not only skip the first loop that's right underneath the loop on the hook, or that first vertical bar, you're also going to skip the first knit stitch. So what we'll be doing then is going to this next chain 3, and we'll be inserting the hook, doing our Tunisian knit stitch, and then chaining 3. And that again will alternate our stitch pattern like it was at the beginning, where we're going to have that Tunisian knit stitch, chain 3, also known as the Melissa stitch, and then Tunisian knit stitch, and we're going to alternate those across until we get to the last 3 stitches. Okay, so here we are at the last 3 stitches of row 8, and what we're going to do is we're going to do our Tunisian knit stitch in the top of that 3rd chain, and then chain 3, 1, 2, 3. Then we're going to skip the next vertical bar. So instead of doing the Tunisian stitch there, we're going to skip it. And then we're going to our very last vertical bar, and we're finding those 2 loops on the side, inserting our hook, and doing a Tunisian simple stitch. And then we will do our standard return again, where we're going to yarn over and draw through one loop, also known as chaining one, and then yarn over and go through 2 loops all the way across. So this is most of what you need to know for this particular stitch pattern, but we'll do one more part, which is how you're going to bind off or end kind of the end of the rows when you're ready to finish your project. So to bind off, you're going to work something called, sometimes referred to as a single crochet bind off. And that's basically where you're going to insert the hook in each stitch as you would be following the pattern. So for this case, as if you're making knit stitches, but you're actually going to create a kind of a row of single crochets at the top. So again, we're skipping the first vertical bar as always. We're going to insert our hook into the top of that chain 3 or our next knit stitch, whichever is there, depending on how you followed the pattern. You're going to insert that as though to knit, yarn over and draw up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2 loops, and that's going to start tying off those edges. So again, you're going to insert your hook as to knit, and by that I mean in the next vertical bar through that loop from front to back. Then yarn over and draw up a loop, yarn over and draw through 2 loops. And we're going to continue that all the way across until you're down to just that 1 chain. Actually, when you get to the last stitch, let's still insert it as though for the Tunisian simple stitch, just to keep that edge clean. So we're going to put our hook underneath these 2 loops, yarn over and draw up a loop, and then again yarn over through 2 loops. And that will bring you to the end. What you can do now is just cut off this yarn and pull it through this last loop, and that will just be the last bit of yarn that you use to finish off your project. I hope this was helpful, and if you make a modern Melissa skirt, I'd love to see a picture of it. You can share it on Ravelry or Facebook, and I'll have links to those where you can share it because I'd love to see it. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.